subscribe now and hit the bell to help Glowing Star don't miss the chance to be inspired. Your participation makes all the difference. Overcoming and innovation. Click subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Join our community that turns obstacles into steps to success. Sign up now and start changing your journey. Bethan never imagined that life would take such a complicated turn after her father's death. His mother, overwhelmed by grief and responsibilities, could barely breathe under the weight of supporting the family alone. Every day was a constant struggle, and the daily chaos left no room to even plan for the future. The pressure of caring for her younger sister, who was seriously ill, made everything even more difficult. And if you've ever been in situations where it felt like the world was collapsing on your head, you must understand how Bethan felt. Her mother, who was once strong and resilient, was now lost, aimless. There was no longer a father figure to share the burden, and the fear of failure consumed her. The relationship between mother and daughter began to fray. Every day, the tension increased. Bethan felt like she needed to do more, be more, but how? She was also just a girl, trying to balance school and caring for her sister. There was no room for error. The pressure of watching her mother fall apart, both emotionally and physically, took its toll on everyone in the house. Arguments were frequent and often intense. But Bethan, even as a young girl, understood that her mother was on the verge of a breakdown. This awareness led her to develop a resilience that she may not have even known she possessed. The family environment became a minefield, where every conversation seemed to have the potential to explode into conflict. The lack of money was a constant reminder of the precariousness of the situation. The bills were piling up, and the possibility of losing the house was a real threat. How many times have you found yourself in a dead end, where every step seemed like a choice between two evils? For Bethan and her mother, this was the daily reality. And the young woman felt that, in some way, she needed to take on responsibilities that would normally fall to an adult. It was an endless cycle of anguish, and the only certainty was the uncertainty of tomorrow. Still, Bethan never stopped believing there was a way out. She looked at her sister, fragile and sick, and felt that giving up was not an option. Life had dealt them a hard blow, but she knew deep down that there were forces somewhere inside her that needed to be awakened. After all, isn't it through difficulties that we discover what we're really made of? Every little gesture, every little attitude counted. It was as if the young woman was waiting for a moment in which she could shine, and when that moment arrived, she would be ready to act. This doesn't mean that things suddenly became easy, but rather that Bethan began to see beyond the immediate chaos. His sister's illness was the main cause for concern. There was no way to ignore the fact that her health condition was getting worse every day. For a family already on edge, this was the breaking point. But, as happens in many stories of overcoming, it is precisely in these moments of greatest despair that the most unlikely solutions begin to emerge. Bethan knew their lives depended on radical change, but she didn't yet know how it would happen. However, something inside her began to change, a spark that would soon turn into a flame of hope. Have you ever felt that feeling of being on the edge of something big, but not yet knowing exactly what? That was Bethan's feeling. The mother, on the other hand, was increasingly exhausted. She had become a shadow of the strong woman she always was. Each day was a struggle against discouragement, and his mental health began to show signs of wear and tear. However, the love for her daughters still kept her standing. The family, even though it was fractured, still had strong ties, and that was the only thing that gave them any kind of hope. But would that be enough to weather the storm? Bethan's relationship with her sister was one of the few things that gave her the strength to continue. Seeing her sister sick motivated her to seek solutions that seemed impossible. But how could someone so young carry the burden of saving his family? Bethan, contrary to what many might think, did not let herself be discouraged. Instead of giving in to despair, she started looking for alternatives. This is a valuable lesson. Instead of focusing on what's wrong, look for hidden opportunities. That's exactly what Bethan began to do, even though, at first, she didn't know where these opportunities would take her. The weight of grief and responsibility is something that shapes a person's character. For Bethan, her father's death and her sister's illness were decisive moments. Situations like this often make us rethink our priorities and prepare us for challenges we didn't even know we were capable of facing. Seeing her mother sink into despair, Bethan decided she would not follow the same path. She began to observe the world around her differently. What previously seemed to be a scenario of imminent defeats was now beginning to show signs of possible victories. And these victories, no matter how small, could change everything. As time passed, the financial situation became even more complicated. Resources were already scarce, and the sisters' illness required expenses that they simply could not afford. But Bethan, instead of allowing herself to be consumed by fear, began to realize something that would change the game forever. She knew she needed to find a way to contribute financially to her household, and that's when her mind started working differently. That feeling of helplessness that dominated her little by little began to give way to a new perspective. What seemed like a moment of despair became the seed of an idea that would change her and her family's lives. Now, the next step was forming. Even though the circumstances were still adverse, Bethan began to glimpse that, perhaps, she could be the key to the family's salvation. And what was just a glimpse would soon turn into something bigger. She was ready to reinvent herself. But how would that happen? Time would tell. After all, it is in the most difficult times that we find our greatest opportunities. Imagine waking up every day not knowing if you will have a roof over your head at night. For many, this would be reason enough to give up. But for Bethan, this was just the beginning of an extraordinary story. In a world where success seems reserved only for those with the right resources, she proved that being at rock bottom can be just the boost you need to reach the top. As a young woman without a home and with responsibilities greater than her age suggested, Bethan found an unlikely path: cell phone repair. What was supposed to be a simple temporary solution ended up becoming the key to something much bigger. Against all odds, she used her skill with technology and turned a life of misery into a billion-dollar empire. And the most impressive? This all started with a desperate need to save his family. If you think that success is reserved for those with the best starting conditions, get ready for a turnaround. Bethan's journey is proof that determination and creativity can overcome any barrier. She not only changed her own life, but also challenged the rules of the game, showing that even the most insurmountable obstacles can be turned into stepping stones to success. Curious to know how this happened? Read on to find out how this young woman turned the impossible into reality, and how you can do the same. Bethan had a talent that few people noticed right away. She had a keen eye for things that most would consider disposable. The broken laptop? For many, it was just another object that needed to be replaced. But for Bethan, each piece was a learning opportunity. From a very early age, she developed an almost obsessive curiosity about how things worked. And not just in terms of technology, but in how small details make all the difference in the final result. This led her to start repairing objects on her own, always seeking to learn something new with each challenge. This kind of practical skill is something you don't learn in traditional schools, and Bethan knew she could make use of this gift, even if she didn't initially realize where it would lead her. Have you ever noticed how some problems make us find innovative solutions when we least expect them? Bethan was always surrounded by financial difficulties, and it was exactly this situation that made her develop her repair skills. The laptop she managed to fix wasn't just a working machine again. It was also a personal victory, a symbol of his ability to overcome adversity using his own hands. While other people would buy a new device, Bethan saw broken parts as a chance to save, learn, and ultimately create something functional again. With each new repair, she became more confident that her knowledge could go beyond just solving small problems. And it wasn't just with technology that Bethan stood out. Life taught her to be resilient and resourceful in everything she did. When something broke at home, whether it was an appliance or even something as simple as a chair, she didn't see it as an inconvenience. On the contrary, this was an invitation to creativity. A screwdriver here, an adjustment there, and soon everything was back to its original state, or even better. It's interesting to think about how necessity pushes us to develop skills that we might otherwise never discover we possess. And for Bethan, this ability to fix things was just the beginning of something much bigger. Over time, Bethan began to realize that her ability to repair was unusual. Many people around her were impressed by what she did, but for her, it was just a way to survive. However, that perception began to change when she repaired a laptop for a neighbor who was convinced he would need to spend a fortune on a new device. To the neighbor's surprise, Bethan did the job quickly and perfectly. At that moment, she realized that what she was doing was valuable. And so, an idea began to form in his mind. Who knows? What was once just a necessity could turn into an opportunity. The most interesting thing about Bethan's abilities was that they were self-taught. She never took a formal repair course, never attended technical classes. Everything he knew came from observation and practice. This made it even more special, because every time she faced a new challenge, she had to learn the hard way. It was as if each new problem brought an embedded lesson. And the most inspiring thing is that anyone can follow this example. Nowadays, with so many tools available, whether on the internet or in books, the ability to learn a new skill is within everyone's reach. The important thing is to have the necessary curiosity and persistence, two qualities that Bethan possessed in abundance. It wasn't just about fixing things, it was about solving problems. And this ability to resolve practical issues soon spread to other areas of Bethan's life. The logical thinking she applied to her repairs began to be useful in family and even emotional matters. When something went wrong, Bethan no longer panicked. She knew that, like a broken machine, many situations in life could be fixed with patience and method. And this is a teaching that we can all apply in our daily lives. When something is not working as it should, instead of giving up, we can stop, analyze, and find the solution, often in a simpler way than we imagined. Additionally, the process of fixing something broken gave Bethan a deeper understanding of value and waste. We live in a society that often prefers to discard what no longer works, without thinking twice. But Bethan began to see it differently. For her, the value wasn't just in buying something new, but in discovering the hidden potential in things that others had already discarded. And this perspective of looking beyond the obvious was what would later help her see opportunities where no one else did. If we can adopt a little of this mindset, we can see the world with new eyes, realizing that often the best solutions are hidden in the things we take for granted. An interesting example that we can follow from Bethan's journey is investing time in learning practical skills. We often find ourselves in situations where we think the only solution is to buy something new or hire someone to do a job that, with a little effort, we could learn to do ourselves. The market is full of online courses that teach everything from home repairs to more complex technological repairs. Wouldn't it be amazing to learn something new that, in addition to saving money, gives us a feeling of self-sufficiency? Bethan knew this, and that's how she began to shape her journey of overcoming. The curious thing is that people often don't realize how capable they are until the need arises. Bethan wasn't born with all of these skills, but she developed them because she had no choice. And, oddly enough, this is something we can apply to our own lives. When we find ourselves stuck, what normally seems like an insurmountable problem can actually be the perfect chance to develop a new skill or perfect talent. If we look at adversity from this perspective, perhaps we can see hidden opportunities in them, just as Bethan did with every broken device that passed through her hands. Bethan was beginning to understand that her skills went beyond simple repairs. Each machine she fixed was a metaphor for her own life, something that, although broken, still had value and could be restored. And as she improved, she began to realize that perhaps this was her way out. But how can you transform this talent into something greater? That was the question that still hung in the air. Little did Bethan know that she was about to discover an opportunity that would change everything, and that practical knowledge would become the key to opening new doors. It was during one of those long, exhausting nights, surrounded by broken parts and damaged appliances, that Bethan had a snap. The idea came like a flash in the middle of the chaos. What if all these devices she was repairing had a much greater value than she imagined? Not just for the repair itself, but for the possibility of resale. Bethan began to realize that she wasn't just repairing devices to save money. She was adding value to something that many would consider trash. Your ability to turn what was broken into something useful could be the key to creating a business. And it was at that moment that the spark of entrepreneurship began to come to life. Bethan has always had a practical outlook on life. She knew that the technological market, no matter how advanced it was, had a significant flaw: the rapid disposal of devices. How many times have you seen people changing their cell phones, even if the old one still worked, just because the new model was released? It was this consumerist mentality that Bethan saw as an opportunity. If she could give new life to old appliances, she could also create a source of income. There, in the midst of so much adversity, she began to formulate a plan. A business based on salvaging old devices could not only help your family financially, but also offer a solution to the problem of waste. This idea, while brilliant, did not come without its challenges. Like many entrepreneurial ideas, it started small, almost unpretentious. Bethan had no business experience, contacts, or capital to start a repair company. However, entrepreneurship is, above all, about seeing opportunities where others see problems. She knew that, no matter how limited her situation was, the knowledge she had acquired could be the difference that would make her stand out in a market saturated with technological innovations. This is something any aspiring entrepreneur needs to understand. Value is not just in what you sell, but in how you solve a real problem. If we stop to think, many of the great entrepreneurs started with simple ideas, but they solved important issues for people. Bethan didn't have the goal of revolutionizing the technology industry, but her business could make an impact on the lives of ordinary consumers. She saw no point in discarding devices that still had the potential to be useful. For her, what was broken didn't mean the end. It was just the beginning of something new. And this philosophy was in itself a valuable lesson for the business world. Not everything needs to be new to have value. When sharing this idea with some people close to her, Bethan realized that there was a market ready to be explored. Friends and neighbors began seeking out her repair services, and she quickly realized she could expand that operation. With each new device she fixed, she saw the possibility of creating something greater. This is the key point for any entrepreneur: identifying demand before it even fully manifests itself. Bethan, although intuitively, already had this instinct. She knew the market was saturated with new products, but few offered affordable solutions to fix existing ones. Now, you can imagine that starting a business from scratch is not easy. And, in fact, it wasn't. Bethan had to deal with countless internal doubts and the fear of failure. But like any big idea, this one required courage. The important thing here is to understand that entrepreneurship is a path of constant learning. With each mistake, Bethan learned a new lesson about how to manage her small business. And these lessons came not only from the technical challenges of repairing devices, but also from the way she managed money, time, and limited resources. If you have ever thought about starting a business, know that the beginning can be difficult, but it is precisely in these moments that you shape the basis of something lasting. Another thing Bethan quickly learned was the power of networking. Although he didn't consciously know it, every customer that showed up at his door was an opportunity to expand his network. By fixing a device, she not only solved the customer's immediate problem, but also created a connection. These people, satisfied with the work, recommended Bethan to others, and word of mouth began to work in her favor. In the business world, this is one of the most important lessons. It's not just about selling a product or service, but about creating trusting relationships with your customers. Bethan also began to understand that entrepreneurship required more than technical skills. She needed to learn how to negotiate, manage her time efficiently, and, most importantly, believe in the potential of her idea. And that wasn't easy. Often, circumstances said otherwise, and discouragement hit hard. But Bethan knew that if she wanted to change her situation and help her family, she needed to move forward. This is another crucial aspect of entrepreneurship: persistence. Things don't always go as planned, but it's the ability to continue that differentiates those who succeed from those who give up along the way. As her small repair business gained traction, Bethan began to wonder, how far could this idea go? She wasn't just fixing gadgets for money. She was creating a solution to a bigger problem. And this is what defines a successful entrepreneur: the long-term vision. Bethan knew that if she managed to structure her business well, she could transform that small initiative into something much bigger. For many, this may seem like excessive ambition, but for her, it was a question of survival. She needed to make this work, not just for herself, but for her family. What started as an immediate need was turning into a real business opportunity. Bethan was on the cusp of something big, and although she didn't know it yet, she was about to take the next big step in her entrepreneurial journey. She knew the repair market was just the beginning. With her ability to see value where others saw only waste, Bethan began to envision new possibilities. But before any expansion, she would need to ensure that her idea was solid. After all, what would it take to take your business to the next level? That, she would soon discover. Bethan's sister's illness has always been a shadow that hangs over the family. Since the diagnosis, the situation seemed like a race against time. With each new visit to the doctor, the news was increasingly worrying. Bethan's sister, frail and increasingly weakened, was the center of all the family's attention. The need for urgent surgery was becoming apparent, and the cost of this procedure was a burden they simply could not bear alone. This scenario of uncertainty and anguish deeply affected Bethan. She knew that somehow she had to find a solution to ensure her sister had a chance to survive. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you feel like time is running out? Bethan lived with this feeling every day. What made the situation even more challenging was the lack of financial resources. Her sister's surgery was extremely expensive, and the healthcare system they had access to did not offer the necessary coverage to perform the procedure on time. With each new day, her sister's health worsened, and Bethan knew they couldn't wait much longer. It was as if each tick of the clock represented one step closer to losing someone she loved deeply. The cruelest thing about her sister's illness was the fact that the family had no control over the situation. They could not cure the disease, nor could they pay for treatment. The feeling of helplessness was devastating. Bethan, who has always been resilient and focused on solving problems, this time found herself facing an obstacle that seemed impossible to overcome. The fear of losing her sister consumed her, but at the same time, it motivated her to find a solution, no matter how unlikely it was. This is a powerful lesson. In moments of despair, we find strength we didn't even know we had. But how do you maintain hope when all seems lost? For Bethan, the answer was keeping busy. While her sister was in the hospital, Bethan used whatever free time she had to work on her business ideas and think of ways to raise the money needed for the surgery. It was as if his mind needed to focus on something concrete to not be consumed by fear and anxiety. This type of behavior is common in times of crisis. We hold on to what we can control, even if it's a small task, so we don't get overwhelmed by what we can't. Bethan knew she had no time to waste. At each appointment, doctors made it clear that her sister's condition was critical. If they were unable to perform the surgery soon, the chances of survival would decrease drastically. And this constant pressure was what pushed her to seek creative solutions. While others would have given in to despair, Bethan decided she would do whatever was necessary to save her sister. And this is where a valuable lesson comes in for all of us. In extreme situations, the focus must be on solutions, not problems. Bethan didn't have all the money in the world, but she had the determination and creativity to find a way out. The search for a financial solution felt like a never-ending marathon. Bethan started looking for loans, asking friends for help, and even considering selling the few assets her family still owned. However, the amount needed for the surgery was exorbitant, and the time was short. But instead of completely despairing, Bethan kept moving. She knew that stopping meant giving up, and giving up was not an option. If you've ever faced a situation where it seemed like there was no way out, you can understand how vital it is to keep going, even when all the odds are against you. The bond between Bethan and her sister has always been strong, but the illness brought them even closer. Seeing her sister fighting for her life motivated her to fight even harder to find a solution. They shared a deep bond, and Bethan felt like she couldn't fail. Love for her sister was the driving force behind all her actions. This type of unconditional love is what moves us to do the unthinkable, to seek strength where there are none, and to persist when everything seems to be lost. For Bethan, her sister was her top priority, and she would do anything to ensure her survival. Amid all this emotional and financial storm, Bethan also had to deal with family pressure. Her mother, already exhausted and overwhelmed, could not bear the thought of losing a daughter. Her mother's mental health was hanging by a thread, and Bethan knew that if something happened to her sister, it would destroy her mother completely. It was an emotional burden that Bethan carried alone, and it only increased the weight of responsibility she felt on her shoulders. And once again, she found a way to transform this burden into motivation to move forward. One of the biggest challenges Bethan faced was the feeling of running out of time. With each new day, she knew she was closer to an outcome she didn't want to face. But instead of letting herself be paralyzed by fear, she dedicated herself even more to finding a way out. And this dedication was rewarded. Over time, her business ideas began to take shape, and she envisioned a way to raise the money needed for the surgery. It wouldn't be easy, but Bethan knew it was possible. And when you believe that something is possible, the chances of success increase considerably. Her sister's illness, although devastating, ultimately became the catalyst for Bethan's transformation. It was this challenge that pushed her to become more creative, more determined, and more resilient. She knew that if she could save her sister, she would be proving to herself that she was capable of anything. And that thought gave her the strength to continue, even when everything seemed to conspire against her. This is one of the most powerful lessons we can learn. Our biggest challenges often turn into our greatest opportunities for growth. The turning point in Bethan's life began with an unexpected meeting with Rocky. One of those moments that, at first glance, seem like an everyday event, but end up changing everything. Rocky, an acquaintance from the neighborhood, showed up with an opportunity that Bethan would never have imagined: a whole batch of cell phones that needed repairs. The idea of repairing those devices and selling them for profit came immediately. To anyone else, this might seem like hard work with no guarantees, but to Bethan, this was the chance she had been waiting for. After all, if I had already fixed so many devices myself, why not turn it into a business? Bethan saw Rocky's proposal as an open door. He had access to hundreds of cell phones that had not passed quality control and were therefore considered defective and unsellable. But Bethan knew that many of those problems were simple to solve. It was as if fate had placed before her the perfect solution to her financial difficulties. Of course, the situation was not completely under control. She still needed money to buy cell phones and invest in spare parts. But like any good entrepreneur, Bethan was not intimidated by the initial barriers. She knew that if she could overcome these challenges, she could make a lot of profit by selling the repaired devices. Bethan's biggest initial difficulty was finding the capital needed to buy Rocky's cell phones. Although the price was much lower than the market price, she still needed a considerable amount, something her precarious financial situation did not allow. And it was at that point that she began to explore creative alternatives. Asking for a bank loan was risky, but Bethan knew the payoff could be exponential if she played her cards right. Negotiations with Rocky were also intense. He wasn't willing to lower the price too much, but Bethan managed to convince him to make a discount. After all, they were in a neighborhood where money moved slowly, and Rocky knew Bethan was a good bet. With cell phones in hand, Bethan put her plan into action. With each new device she repaired, she saw the profit potential grow. But the process was not simple. Many of the cell phones were more damaged than she expected, requiring time and patience to repair them properly. However, Bethan didn't give up. Every cell phone she managed to restore to its original condition was like a small victory. And over time, she began to realize that she could scale this business. If you could repair cell phones faster, you could sell them in greater quantities and thus increase your profits significantly. The most interesting thing about this phase of her journey was how Bethan began to look beyond simple appliance repairs. She realized that by repairing cell phones and reselling them, she was creating a sustainable cycle. Instead of simply throwing away faulty appliances, she was giving them new life. This insight opened Bethan's eyes to an even bigger market: used and refurbished electronics. The idea of recycling technology, rather than discarding it, was not only profitable, but also sustainable. This put Bethan in a privileged position, as few in the market were exploring this niche in the way she was about to do. Bethan began to expand her horizons and explore new ways of selling. Initially, she sold the repaired cell phones to acquaintances and neighbors, but he quickly realized his local reach was limited. It was then that she began investigating ways to take her business to the next level, contacting store owners and small traders who could buy entire batches of restored cell phones. This strategy began to bear fruit. Instead of selling one device at a time, Bethan started selling lots, which accelerated her cash flow and increased her profits significantly. Bethan's experience also taught her how to negotiate better. By dealing with merchants, she began to understand the nuances of bulk transactions and the importance of ensuring healthy profit margins. Each negotiation was a new lesson in how to run a successful business. She learned to adjust the price of devices depending on the quantity purchased and the condition of the cell phones after repair. This type of flexibility was crucial to maintaining a steady flow of sales and ensuring their customers returned for new transactions. Bethan was, without realizing it, developing an essential skill for any business: cultivating long-term relationships with her customers. Another important point in Bethan's journey was the discovery of the power of the internet to sell her products. Initially, she hadn't even considered selling online, but after some research, she realized there was a growing market for refurbished cell phones on e-commerce platforms. With this, it opened a new sales front, placing its devices on e-commerce sites. Demand was impressive, and Bethan quickly saw her profits increase even more. The internet allowed it to reach customers in other regions, and this drastically expanded its market. This is a lesson for any entrepreneur. Don't underestimate the power of digital platforms to boost your business. However, success did not come without challenges. Bethan began to realize that as her business grew, she needed more time, resources, and even a team to handle the growing demand. That's when she started to entertain the idea of hiring people to help her. Although she was still in the early stages of the business, she knew that if she wanted to grow, she would need more hands to keep the momentum going. This decision was difficult as it involved additional costs, but Bethan, with her entrepreneurial vision, knew it was a necessary step to scale her business. The expansion of his team was an important milestone, as it showed that his repair business was already reaching another level. Ultimately, the experience of repairing cell phones for profit transformed Bethan in many ways. Not only did she make money, but she also developed valuable skills that would prepare her for even greater challenges in the future. The process of fixing something broken and selling it for a profit is actually a powerful metaphor for what she was doing with her own life. Each cell phone repaired was a step towards financial stability, and each sale was proof that she could, indeed, transform her situation completely. Bethan was starting to build something solid, but there was still a lot to be done. The next step in his journey was about to reveal itself. As Bethan's business began to grow, challenges also began to appear. One of the first obstacles she faced was cash flow. Repairing cell phones and reselling them seemed like a simple idea, but the financial reality was much more complicated. Bethan often needed to invest in spare parts and specialist tools before seeing any financial return from selling the repaired appliances. This mismatch between investment and return began to take its toll. She needed initial capital to make the business work, but how could she get that money without putting what little her family had at risk? This was a question she asked herself daily. In addition to the financial issue, Bethan also faced logistical challenges. She quickly realized that repairing cell phones was a job that required time, patience, and precision. Each device was unique, with specific problems that needed to be diagnosed and resolved. The work, which initially seemed simple, began to prove more complex and time-consuming. This created constant pressure to deliver devices on time, especially when she promised deadlines to customers. Bethan began to feel the strain of running a business alone. With each cell phone that arrived in their hands, customer expectations increased, and the pressure to not disappoint them was immense. Another major obstacle Bethan faced was the relationship with her suppliers. It depended on quality replacement parts to repair the devices, and suppliers often did not deliver on time or sent defective parts. This delayed the repair process and consequently affected delivery to customers. It was a chain of problems that Bethan needed to learn to manage. And as every entrepreneur knows, dealing with suppliers is an art. Bethan quickly realized that to be successful, she needed to build strong, trusting relationships with those who provided the parts she so desperately needed. Time pressure was also a constant enemy. Bethan worked long hours, often without rest, to ensure cell phones were repaired and delivered to customers on time. This generated physical and mental fatigue, which began to take its toll. It wasn't uncommon for Bethan to spend sleepless nights working on a batch of cell phones, trying to meet a tight deadline. This level of dedication, although essential for the business's growth, began to affect their health and well-being. As any entrepreneur can attest, balancing work and personal life is one of the biggest challenges in building a business from scratch. The challenge with customers also began to appear as the business grew. Although Bethan was skilled and dedicated, clients were not always satisfied with the end result. Some devices, despite being repaired, presented new problems after delivery, and this generated dissatisfaction and complaints. Bethan knew that customer satisfaction was critical to the success of her business, but dealing with complaints was something she still needed to learn. She began to understand that in addition to being a good repair technician, she needed to develop customer service skills. Knowing how to deal with customer expectations and frustrations was a crucial part of her growth as a businesswoman. The relationship with the owner of the property where Bethan and her family lived also deteriorated over time. With the increase in demand for her repair service, Bethan needed to use more space at home to store cell phones and parts. This caught the attention of the owner, who didn't like the idea of his property being used as a business location. He began pressuring Bethan for more rent payments, threatening the family with eviction if she didn't meet deadlines. This extra stress meant Bethan needed to balance her finances even more, allocating part of the profit that could be reinvested into the business to ensure her family had a roof over their heads. Another obstacle was competition. As Bethan's business began to grow, other electronics repairers began to take notice of her presence in the market. This brought a new layer of pressure. She was no longer the only option for clients, and the quality of her work, as well as the prices she offered, were constantly under evaluation. To stand out, Bethan needed to find ways to differentiate her service. She began to focus on offering more personalized service and ensuring that her customers were satisfied not only with the repair, but with the experience as a whole. This strategy proved to be effective, but the competition was always present, ready to take advantage of any mistake. Fiscal challenges also began to emerge. Bethan, like many small entrepreneurs, started her business informally, without thinking much about the tax obligations that would arise as the business grew. However, as profits increased, she realized she needed to regularize her situation to avoid problems with the tax authorities. This meant hiring an accountant, learning about taxes, and making sure all your transactions were recorded correctly. This was a difficult learning experience, but necessary so that the business could grow sustainably and without unpleasant surprises in the future. As she faced all of these challenges, Bethan began to realize that she would need help to continue growing. While she was proud to have gotten as far as she did on her own, she knew that to scale the business, she would need a team. Hiring staff was new to her, and finding trustworthy people who shared her vision and dedication wouldn't be easy. But Bethan understood that this was the only way to continue expanding. Additionally, she needed to learn how to delegate tasks and trust other people to do some of the work, something every entrepreneur faces when moving from a solo business to a team. Finally, perhaps the biggest challenge Bethan faced was psychological. The weight of carrying a business on his shoulders, combined with the responsibility of supporting his family and taking care of his sister's health, was overwhelming. There were days when she felt on the verge of collapse, questioning whether she could really handle everything. But even in these moments of doubt and exhaustion, Bethan always found a reason to keep going. What moved her was the certainty that, despite all the challenges, she was on the right path. And when you believe that no obstacle is big enough to stop you from succeeding, Bethan knew that to take her business to the next level, she would need to do something bold, something that would completely change the rules of the game. It was then that the idea of making a direct proposal to one of the biggest technology executives in the country came up. The path to becoming the CEO was not easy, but Bethan was determined. She knew that what she had to offer was innovative and could help the company both financially and in terms of environmental responsibility. However, I knew I would have to be convincing and courageous to be heard. That moment would be decisive, and everything would depend on your ability to sell your idea in a clear and irresistible way. When Bethan finally managed to schedule the meeting, anxiety took over. She knew she was faced with a unique opportunity, but she also knew that many others had already failed when trying to impress the CEO. The pressure was immense. However, Bethan could not afford to waver. She prepared like she had never done before, studying the company, its numbers, its weaknesses, and opportunities for improvement. She knew she couldn't just come up with a generic idea. He needed to show how his business could generate profit, cut costs, and still help the environment by recycling cell phone parts. This was the central point of his proposal. The day of the meeting finally arrived, and Bethan entered the company's imposing building. The environment was formal, corporate, and the young woman felt a little out of place, but she wouldn't let it show. She was taken to the conference room, where the CEO was waiting for her. The first impression was of a strong, confident woman, someone who was used to dealing with big numbers and quick decisions. Bethan, for a moment, felt the weight of responsibility that fell on her shoulders, but quickly remembered her preparation. She had a plan and knew that if she could convey her vision clearly, she would have a good chance of success. Bethan started the presentation simply, explaining who she was, where she came from, and how she got there. But she quickly changed the tone, moving on to data and concrete facts. It showed how his cell phone repair business could seamlessly integrate with the company's supply chain. She explained that by using recycled parts, the company would not only reduce its costs, but also significantly reduce the environmental impact of its production. Every cell phone we restore is one less cell phone discarded into the environment, said Bethan. It was a powerful phrase, and she knew it. The CEO, who until then was just listening, began to show interest. The highlight of her presentation was when Bethan showed the detailed business model. She wasn't just there with a vague idea. He had studied in depth how his company could operate on a large scale, meeting the needs of the technology giant. I know it may seem risky to invest in a business like mine, she said, but every great innovation has started with a simple, brave idea. What I'm proposing is a paradigm shift. We can reuse, recycle, and at the same time profit from it. The CEO, who until then maintained a serious and restrained posture, now seemed truly impressed. Bethan had captured his attention. Still, Bethan knew it wasn't enough to just impress. She needed to make a concrete offer, something the company couldn't refuse. It was then that she revealed the boldest part of her proposal, offering her services based on results. If, in a month, my company is unable to reduce its costs by at least 10%, I will absorb the losses myself, Bethan said confidently. It was a calculated risk, but Bethan knew this was the way to show how much she believed in the potential of her idea. This type of boldness is what often separates great entrepreneurs from those who just rely on ideas. The CEO, now intrigued, began asking more detailed questions about how Bethan's repair model would work on a large scale. How do you plan to manage the volume? Asked the executive. Bethan, prepared, explained how she had already mapped out suppliers of recyclable parts in different regions, as well as plans to expand her team of technicians and acquire new tools. I understand that scale is a challenge, but it's a challenge I'm ready to take on. We already have the basic structure in place, and with the right investment, we can grow quickly and deliver the results you expect. It was a precise answer, and the CEO knew Bethan wasn't bluffing. One of the most memorable moments of the meeting was when Bethan touched on the topic of corporate social responsibility. She explained that by using recycled parts, the company would not only reduce costs, but could also position itself as a sustainability leader in the technology sector. Imagine the impact of a marketing campaign based on recycled and sustainable products. Today's consumers are increasingly concerned about the environment, and you could be at the forefront of this change. That was the key that opened the CEO's eyes. Bethan had not only presented a financial solution, but also a reputational opportunity that the company could not ignore. After the presentation, there was a brief silence in the room. The CEO seemed to be considering all the information she had just received. Bethan knew this was the decisive moment. The executive finally broke the silence with a final question. Do you really believe you can make this work at scale? Bethan looked the CEO in the eye and replied, without hesitation, I believe it's already working. We just need a chance to prove it. It was a direct, confident answer that demonstrated all the determination that Bethan had. The CEO smiled slightly, something rare in such formal meetings. Bethan knew at that moment that she had earned his respect. The meeting ended with the CEO saying that she would need to consult her team before making a final decision. But Bethan already felt like she had planted a seed. And as every great entrepreneur knows, sometimes all we need is a little break to start growing. Bethan left that building with a feeling of accomplishment. Regardless of the outcome, she knew she had done her best, and that if she continued to pursue her goals with the same determination, success was only a matter of time. What came next was yet to be determined, but one thing was certain. Bethan was ready for whatever challenge the future brought. After so many struggles and challenges, Bethan's success finally began to materialize. The CEO, impressed by his boldness and innovative proposal, agreed to give his business a chance. From that moment on, things started to take a completely different turn. What once seemed like a never-ending struggle to survive has turned into a solid path to success. The feeling of victory did not come all at once, but rather little by little, as Bethan saw the results of her effort and dedication materialize. Every cell phone repaired, every deal closed, was proof that his persistence had paid off. But success was not immediate. Even with the support of the CEO and the company, Bethan still faced obstacles. Implementing her business model on a large scale brought new challenges that she had not anticipated. Managing a larger team, dealing with larger volumes of devices, and ensuring quality of service were some of the obstacles that appeared. However, now she had something she didn't have at first: resources. With the company's investment, she was able to hire a team, purchase better equipment, and expand her business. And that made all the difference. With each new barrier, Bethan now had the tools needed to overcome them. Over time, Bethan became a reference in the refurbished electronics market. Her ability to turn what was broken into something valuable not only saved her family financially, but also placed her in a prominent position in the sustainable technology sector. She began to be invited to lectures and conferences, where she shared her story of overcoming and how she built an empire from a batch of cell phones that no one wanted. The message she conveyed was clear. Success does not come without challenges, but it is the ability to persist in the face of difficulties that defines who gets there. One of the greatest rewards for Bethan was being able to ensure her sister's treatment. With the money her business generated, she was finally able to pay for the surgery her sister needed so much. It was a moment of relief and celebration for the whole family. The surgery was successful, and his sister began to recover. This, without a doubt, was one of Bethan's greatest triumphs. All the effort, all the sleepless nights, all the moments of doubt were worth it when she saw her sister healthy again. The financial victory was significant, but the personal and emotional victory was even greater. Furthermore, Bethan achieved something that, at the beginning of her journey, seemed impossible. She bought a house for her family. After years of facing the uncertainty of losing where they lived, Bethan provided a safe home for her mother and sister. This achievement was more than material. It was the symbol of everything she had overcome. The house represented stability, security, and the realization of a dream that, for a long time, seemed distant. Now, she was no longer at the mercy of a demanding owner. His family had a place to call home, and that was something no amount of money could replace. With the success of her business consolidated, Bethan also began to look to the future with new ambitions. She didn't just want to maintain what she had built. I wanted to expand. His vision went beyond simply repairing cell phones. She began exploring other areas of sustainable technology, such as reusing electronic components from computers and tablets. The idea was to create a complete repair and recycling ecosystem, offering sustainable solutions for the technology market. More than ever, Bethan was focused on growing, but with social and environmental responsibility, values that have always guided her journey. One of the most exciting moments of this new phase was when Bethan started giving talks to young entrepreneurs. She knew how important it was to inspire other people, especially those who, like her, came from difficult situations and didn't have many resources at their disposal. In her talks, she didn't just talk about the numbers of her business, but about the mentality it took to get there. She emphasized the importance of believing in yourself, even when the entire world seems to be against you. His story became an example that, with perseverance, anyone can turn a simple idea into something extraordinary. Bethan's success was also a victory for her community. She began employing people in the neighborhood, offering opportunities to those who, like her, were looking for a chance to improve their lives. Her business was not only a source of income for her, but also for many other families. This social impact has been one of the most rewarding aspects of her journey. Seeing the positive effect her success had on other people's lives gave Bethan a sense of fulfillment that went beyond the financial. She was changing lives just as her own had been changed. Over time, Bethan gained recognition not only as a successful entrepreneur, but as a leader in the field of sustainable technology. Her ability to innovate and find solutions to problems that many ignored put her on the radar of large companies and investors. What started as a small initiative to repair cell phones has grown to become a multi-million-dollar business. And Bethan knew this was just the beginning. Her entrepreneurial spirit drove her to always look for the next challenge, the next opportunity. She had achieved a lot, but there was still much more to be done. Looking back, Bethan saw how much had changed since the beginning of her journey. From a young girl struggling to survive, she transformed into a successful businesswoman, a strong and determined woman who did not let herself be defeated by adversity. Her path was full of obstacles, but each one made her stronger. And now, with the future in front of her, Bethan was ready to face any challenge that came her way. Success, after all, is not just the destination, but the journey. And Bethan had embraced that journey with courage, resilience, and a vision that took her far beyond what she could have imagined. Bethan's story shows us that life's biggest obstacles can actually be the greatest opportunities for transformation. She went from homeless and hopeless to a billionaire CEO, all thanks to her persistence, creativity, and courage to face challenges that many would avoid. Now, the question that remains is, what are you going to do with the challenges that lie ahead of you? Will you let them stop you, or will you use them as a springboard to something bigger? It doesn't matter where you are now. The most important thing is where you can get to. Success starts with small actions, a simple idea, and the determination to never give up, even when the path seems impossible. What steps are you willing to take today to change your life? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, so why not start now? If this story inspired you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep learning about how to overcome obstacles and create the success you deserve. The next step to transforming your life is within your reach. You just have to decide to take it.